Right now, all over the world, we are pushing our physical power infrastructure far past its designed mechanical limits. The vulnerabilities of aging systems are buckling. In 2025, wide-area blackouts swept across Chile, Mexico, and the Iberian Peninsula, driven by extreme weather and demand. A massive new strain is accelerating this, the energy requirements of data centers powering the artificial intelligence boom. These are hyperscale facilities, massive enterprise-grade data centers designed to support highly robust, scalable computational loads. Connecting these loads requires a staggering amount of raw material. Typical underground transmission lines needed to feed these facilities demand 19,500 kilograms of copper for every single kilometer of cable. This surge in demand collides with a brittle reality. The baseline grid relies on aging high-voltage towers and substations with severely limited capacity. This chart shows the projected energy demand against our current infrastructure limits. While the line representing new power requirements for AI and electrification spikes sharply, the bar representing current grid capacity remains flat. With the margins this thin, even normal seasonal stress, like wide-area winter cold snaps, can push this capacity balance directly into system failure. Regulators face an immediate mathematical problem. They must figure out how to integrate these massive tech loads without causing wide-area blackouts or forcing everyday citizens to pay for the required infrastructure upgrades. State governments are no longer handing out blanket tax incentives to attract tech expansion. Those policies have vanished, replaced overnight by emergency regulatory breaks. In just the first 6 weeks of 2026, state legislatures filed over 300 bills across more than 30 states aimed directly at regulating data centers. Historically, states lured tech companies with heavy tax breaks. Today, former havens like Virginia and Georgia are advancing legislation to reduce or eliminate those credits. The first major defensive strategy emerging from this legislative wave is the construction moratorium. New York, South Dakota, and Oklahoma have introduced bills to pause construction on facilities drawing over 100 megawatts. They are demanding time to study the impacts on local utilities, water supplies, and community rates. These pauses give grid operators breathing room to assess capacity, but they stall local tech investment, pushing developers to search for states with fewer rules. The second defensive strategy targets the financing, the creation of special rate classes for large load customers. Utilities are now demanding severe, long-term financial commitments. Dominion Energy proposed a rate class requiring high-energy users to make a 14-year commitment to cover 85% of all network costs upfront. This matrix compares two state-level strategies by their impact on the grid and the developer. Moratoriums protect grid stability by freezing new demand, but halt developer deployment entirely. Special rate classes protect the grid from cost shifting, but erect massive capital barriers for developers. By forcing tech companies to internalize their own infrastructure costs, states have officially ended the era of the Quick Connect tech facility. The federal government is now moving toward mandatory coordination through FERC Order 1920. Order 1920 mandates that regional grid operators adopt a comprehensive, forward-looking, long-term regional transmission planning process. Providers enter a strict 3-year cycle to develop at least 3 long-term scenarios forecasting system needs 20 years out. Operators use these scenarios to identify transmission upgrades required to handle future loads before the grid fails. A key provision is right-sizing. Instead of replacing an old transmission line with an identical new one, operators must evaluate if that facility can be scaled up to meet long-term needs more efficiently. The order specifies exact criteria for right-sizing. It targets transmission facilities operating below 200 kilovolts, kV being a standard measure of electrical pressure, that the owner already anticipates replacing within the next 10 years. This plan comes with a massive bureaucratic hurdle. States and grid operators must agree on an ex-ante regional cost allocation method. Ex-ante refers to establishing a binding, upfront agreement on exactly who pays for the project before it is ever approved. This federal blueprint requires binding financial alignment between multiple stakeholders before a single cable is laid, ensuring the cost of long-term stability is shared by the entities driving the need. Order 1920 shifts grid management from localized, reactive patching into a proactive, legally binding strategy. The national reality has inverted. Prioritizing pure deployment speed at the expense of system integrity is no longer a viable strategy. We can plot this on a chart mapping deployment speed against grid responsibility. The outdated incentive model sits bottom right, allowing maximum speed but demanding zero grid responsibility. The new realities, Order 1920 and special rate classes, sit top left, enforcing high responsibility and sacrificing rapid deployment. For data center developers, the search for tax havens must end. You have to pivot to searching for grid-ready havens. Developer survival now requires deep capital liquidity to fund your own network connection costs up front. You also have to accept demand response agreements, where your power can be curtailed during grid emergencies. State policymakers need to recognize that construction moratoriums are only a temporary, blunt instrument. The definitive long-term solution is implementing large load rate classes. This protects your residential constituents from footing the bill without permanently locking out tech investment. Utility operators must leverage the mandates of FERC Order 1920 immediately. Use the mandatory 20-year forecasting cycles to force state regulators and private developers into financial alignment. This is the mechanism to secure the capital needed to upgrade your aging infrastructure. The expansion of AI capacity is now a question of infrastructure. Success depends on funding and fortifying the physical power grid.